Good evening, and thank you for joining us, NAHT, for our webinar in conjunction with Oak National Academy. This is open to members of NAHT and non-members, and we're really pleased that well over 1,000 of you have registered to join us this evening. We're going to hear from Matt Hood, who's the principal of Oak National Academy, about how they can support you with your in-school and your remote learning. Also joining us this evening, we have Nick Brooke, who is NAHT's Deputy General Secretary. And we're going to hear from an NAHT member, primary head herself, Donna Lewis, about her journey with Oak Academy. You'll be pleased to see as well this evening we have a British Sign Language interpreter, Alison Gilchrist, who's joining us as well. So thank you very much, and hopefully that will make this more accessible for you, our members. The hashtag for this evening's webinar is COVID School Response. So I just want to draw your attention to just a little plea about social media. We appreciate you sharing and commenting on our events on social media. However, we'd like to request that if you're posting any photos of any of our digital broadcasts, you're mindful to not include comments from others which appear in the chat function. During these challenging times, sharing personal views with like-minded others can be cathartic and empowering, and we'd prefer those comments to stay within the community of the audience. So thank you for your understanding. Anyway, my name is Natalie Pettifer. I'm a regional organiser with NAHT. I'm facilitating the event. Lots of you have been using the chat comments already, which is great to see. We've also had a few questions submitted. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see the tab Ask a Question. So here, if you can enter your questions rather than in the chat section, people can vote for their favourites, and also you can vote on others. And that's where we'll be taking your questions from later on in the evening. So as I say, thank you very much for joining us. If you do have any problems with the technical side of things and you miss anything, there will be a recording instantly available on the same link, and also you'll be able to share that with colleagues at a later date. There's also my colleague Laura, who's going to be doing the background work, so if you're having any technical issues, please do let her know in the chat section as well. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm now going to hand over to Nick Brooke.
Thanks everyone for joining. It's fantastic to see quite so many colleagues on this call. I think we're over 1,100 now. Look, I'm going to just say only a very few brief words before handing over to Matt. I just wanted to set out what the purpose of this session was. It's to help colleagues get clued up on what Oak is, how it can or might support remote learning in your school during lockdown, and to answer some of your questions about how best we can use that resource. What this session isn't, however, is going to be about discussing the reasonableness of government's expectations around remote learning. And particularly, I suppose, for those schools which have considerable numbers of pupils still on roll in school, and trying to balance the demands of supporting children at home with continued teaching within school. We're not going to be talking equally about the role of Ofsted and the expectations set by the Secretary of State that Ofsted will investigate parental complaints. And we're frankly not going to be discussing either the appalling lack of trust displayed by political leaders in the professionalism and commitment of school staff. Today is about how Oak can support you. And in the face of so many other competing priorities, it is an absolute great pleasure to welcome Matt, who is the founder of Oak National Academy, and also Donna, who, as Natty said, we'll be hearing from later. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the journey that Donna has guided her school on in developing their remote learning offer. But without wasting any more time, I want to hand over to Matt to start this session off. Just before I do, I'll just reiterate Natalie's call. Please do use the question function at the bottom here, and I'm really hoping that we can get through as many questions as we can in the time that we've got. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Nick, and good evening, everybody. First of all, just want to say a huge thank you to NAHT for hosting this webinar with us this evening. We're really grateful to all of the team who've made this possible, and a big welcome to the well over 1,100 people who've joined us this evening. I'm a chair of governors at a school, and I'm regularly in touch with my own head teacher, and so know the work and energy and effort that's going into everything that you're doing at the moment, not just remote education, but for lots of you testing, as well as essentially being a critical part of your community hub. So to do this 5 till 6 on your Thursday evening after a second, I'm sure, very busy week, it is, we're just really grateful for you coming and spending the time with us. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible so we can maximize time for questions and discussion afterwards. But what I'm hoping to do through this presentation is give you a little bit of a walkthrough of what Oak National Academy is and how we might be able to help and support you with your remote education provision. Through that, hopefully you will leave the session with some information that might be able to reduce the workload of your teachers and hopefully improve the offer that you're able to provide to your pupils at home. I'm just going to share my screen. So this is the terrifying bit where I hope the technology doesn't fail me. Here we go. So I'll start with just a brief bit of background. For those of you who don't know, Oak was set up by teachers in April 2020, so the start of the very first lockdown in response to the pandemic. And our aim is and has always been to support teachers to ensure that all pupils have access to good quality remote learning. We now have about 10,000 lessons available on our site. They are free for anybody to access. They cover 4 to 16 age range, so everything from reception through to year 11, both in mainstream and really, really important specialist settings across around 20 different subjects. And we're really pleased that we've been able to help in 2 ways, or at least teachers tell us that we've been able to help in 2 ways, one of which has been reducing workload, and the other has been helping to supplement the remote provision that schools are up and down the country providing day to day. The last count, I pull this pretty regularly. We've done 45 million lessons so far. Last week alone, we had 3.5 million pupils taking part in lessons with us. Those numbers are way over and above what we ever expected. But in one sense are no surprise to me. This is teachers from up and down the country spending their time and energy and effort trying to help each other. Lots of whom, I hope even some of whom on the 1,000 here, I'm pretty sure we've got some of your teachers involved in creating some of these lessons. Just a real testament to the hard work and dedication of our profession. In walking you through the site and how to make the most of it, the first really important thing to note is that it is essentially split into 2 different functions. The first function is our online classroom. This is the pupil-facing element of Oak National Academy. It's where young people can go, and the interface is designed to help them find a lesson and take part in it with the minimum amount of fuss and the maximum amount of accessibility. I am not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about this evening, but just want to flag up it's about 50% of the work that we do, and you can at any point, as can your pupils and indeed their parents, navigate through our lessons through our online classroom. There's no login required. As I said, there's no charge to schools or to parents or to anybody else for using it. And if you are in the position of needing something off the shelf, ready to go, this button in the middle here, our schedule, gives a default schedule that pupils can get going with straight away. Where I want to spend most of our time is the other half of our site, which is our teacher hub. This has been specifically designed for teachers and school leaders to use. Essentially, the back end of these 2 interfaces is the same. It's the same 10,000 lessons, but this section of our site has been designed specifically to help teachers reducing their workload and to improve the remote learning offer that they have. So this is the landing page. This is what it looks like. And 2 things I want to highlight when you first come to this page that will be useful. The first is the ability to search our entire database of 10,000 lessons by subject, topic, keyword. Just like a Google search, you write it in there and it'll tell you every lesson associated with that particular keyword that you've identified. Or alternatively, you can browse by subject or by key stage. Either of those 2 options are available to you. Let's say I want to navigate and take a look at the Key Stage 3 history lessons. If I navigate by subject, I can go history and then identify Key Stage 3, or vice versa, go Key Stage 3 and then choose history, and it will bring me up with this page. This is the key stage and subject level view, and the first thing that we encourage people to do when they come to this page is take a look at the curriculum maps. They sit at the top behind those teal buttons, and you can choose a PDF or an editable Word version. Those documents try to do two things. The first is just set out within this subject and key stage what content it is that Oak National Academy has resources available for, like what did we cover? And the second is the rationale for choosing those things, the rationale for choosing the order, the rationale for choosing the topics. We have tried, wherever possible, in the selection of the content for this curriculum to be as well aligned with the national curriculum as possible. And Chair of our board describes it as minimally esoteric. We've tried to choose the things that we think are most commonly taught across subjects and key stages, from EYFS reception right the way through to Key Stage 4. So we've now got to our page that's showing us the subject and key stage, and I've identified the next level down of detail, which is the unit level. In this case, how dark were the dark ages? The unit level page here shows me all of the lessons that are within an individual unit, how many of them there are. We can see that there are 6 lessons in this particular unit. And on the left-hand side, I can see each of the lessons with a brief description of what that lesson is all about. On the right-hand side, I can see some of the other units that are associated or come close in the sequence to this particular unit. So this is my second view. First view, subject and key stage level. My next view goes down to the unit. The third view that I can then take a look at is digging into an individual lesson. So we've gone from key stage and subject through to the unit, right the way through down to the individual lesson. What as the teacher you can see here are each of the different lesson components: a video, a presentation, a worksheet, an exit quiz. If you scroll down, there would also be a transcript. And from there, you can see each of those elements and navigate your way around them. We have aimed here to try to replicate the phases of a classroom lesson as close as it's possible to do through a remote setting. This is never going to be as good as pupils back in their schools with you full time, but we've done our best to mimic those different phases as close as possible. Different lessons have sometimes different elements. Particularly those EYFS and reception lessons tend to have a slightly fewer elements. It tends to be a little bit more straightforward. Again, this is pretty standard for a Key Stage 3 or Key Stage 4 lesson. An introductory quiz, activating prior knowledge, some kind of explanation or modelling with questions through a video, live with asynchronous with a teacher. Practice tasks for applications, maybe through a worksheet, and then some kind of exit quiz to check for understanding. Each of the lessons broadly follows that format and sequence. So brilliant. I've got my key stage and subject. I've got my unit. I've identified the lesson that I want to share with the pupils. Big question is then, what can I do with it? And here I want to direct your attention to these 2 teal buttons on the top right-hand side. There are 2 things that you can do with the resources that are available. The first is, in 70% of cases, you can download them. You can download the editable PowerPoint, an editable worksheet, or a printable worksheet as a PDF if you're sending work packs home, because some of your pupils don't have the devices or the data. This is the case in about 70% of our lessons. The reason it's 70%, and apologies up front here, I don't want to send you all off to sleep by endless talk of copyright restrictions, but turns out copyright restrictions are pretty ferocious when you're a national online platform in a way that I never experienced when I was a teacher. So we have permissions for downloadable content on 70% of lessons. For those 30% we don't, apologies, we're working on ever increasing that number, but it's just not possible for us to do that at the moment. And the other thing that you can do if you don't want to download the resources is then share the lesson. And you can do that easily through any of these platforms just by clicking on that button. You might be using a Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, in which case you can generate a link that you can send into your own virtual learning environment. You might equally just have a Word document or an Excel document that you send home to parents or pupils. You might just want to copy the link to that lesson, drop that in and send that home as well. One more run through. So I navigate by subject and key stage. I can see the unit, I can see the lesson, I can choose to download it, or I can choose to share it. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a run through of the Teacher Hub, which is the bit that we've designed specifically for you. The next thing I just want to briefly talk about is what we did at my school when we were thinking about making the most out of these resources. 3 really important things that we thought about. The first was a mapping exercise of our curriculum against what the Oak resources were able to provide. And the great news was we had a really, really significant amount of overlap, which was brilliant. A good test for me that we weren't too esoteric. And we were able to use the Oak resources to supplement the work that the teachers were doing in a wide range of units. It wasn't 100% though, right? It's never going to be. We all teach slightly different things. We all contextualize our curriculum for our local context. And so there were 3 options available to us when there wasn't a match. Option number 1 was do our own thing. In some cases, we decided, actually, there aren't any resources here. We do want to do our own thing, and we're going to do that. The second option available to us was if the subject hierarchy allowed, we reorganized units in our curriculum to bring ones where there were remote resources available forward to now, and delay ones that would require pupils to be back in the classroom. So we reordered our curriculum was the second thing. And then in some cases, we just decided to slightly adapt our curriculum to bring it in line. There were a couple of cases where we'd used a different text, for example, and actually the Oak Tech was perfectly suitable, and so we switched over. So first exercise, really, really encourage you to do that mapping exercise. The second thing that we did was thought about an implementation plan. There were some features of this implementation plan that we found really helpful. The first was thinking about what routine and structure we wanted to put in place for our pupils at home, trying to create as close as possible to a normal routine and timetable whilst they weren't here. The second thing that we thought hard about was what technology our pupils had, whether they had a device, whether that device had the necessary data. We've continued to work really hard to campaign for more devices, and indeed have had some success in the last couple of weeks on data. We're hoping in the next couple of weeks that nobody gets charged at all for any data for using Oak National Academy. The third thing that we thought about was particularly vulnerable pupils who might find this process daunting or difficult, what additional support we might need for them. And then the final and most critical thing that we had to think about was the bit of this work that Oak is unfortunately not able to help with, and that is the formative assessment process that needs to go on to address the misconceptions that pupils might have through their learning. We are not able to share data from our quizzes directly back with you about individual pupils. To do that, we would have to put a login in place, and that would affect our accessibility. So we've taken the call not to do it. That said, that means that there needs to be a relatively manual process of getting the results from the quizzes back to the teachers so that they can work with the pupils to address those misconceptions. We've seen 2 different ways working really well. One is just simply copy our quizzes into your own Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or whichever platform you use. Feel free to copy them. Once they're in your VLE, you will have access to the data. The second has been really simple. Pupils have been taking a screenshot or a photograph of their results and sharing that back with their teacher. But we really, really strongly encourage you in your implementation plan to think about that formative assessment cycle. You know, we know from the EEF toolkit that feedback is the strongest intervention that we can put in place to keep pupils progressing. And at the moment, those quiz results don't come back to you. So thinking hard about that is really important. And then finally, I'm just communicating this to parents. On our support page on our website, which I'll show you in a second, we have template letters available, videos that parents can watch so that they understand it. We just thought really carefully about how we communicate with this with parents, and critically, how we communicate this to the young people. And one of the suggestions on a webinar earlier this week was doing Oak lesson with the pupils live so that they get used to it for the first one, and then letting them be increasingly independent if they're able to be so beyond that point. We originally set up Oak for this top left purpose here, supporting remote education when bubbles need to isolate. But I do want to take the opportunity to share with you 3 other ways that great teachers and school leaders up and down the country have managed to use the resources to help with other things. The first about catch up and homework, because you can search for a particular lesson. We have seen lots of schools targeting particular lessons at particular pupils who have particular gaps. The second is cover or teaching beyond your specialism. If your school is anything like mine, you will be doing more cover than you're used to. You might be taking mixed groups or teaching things beyond your specialism. If you need to set cover work or you need to support another teacher beyond your specialism, sharing a link with them to an OAK lesson is a really useful way of being able to do that. If you find yourself in a position where you need to explain Pythagoras theorem and you can't quite remember how to do it, there is a lesson there and some resources to help you, so please do have a look for them. And then finally, particularly for new and early career teachers, this is the time of year when they would be in and out of lots of classrooms observing lots of other teachers. In lots of schools, that is very, very difficult to do at the moment. And so we've seen some universities and school-based initial teacher training providers using the OAK lessons as observation tools and then huddling afterwards with mentors or tutors to debrief what they saw and having a discussion about what they might do differently in their lesson when, hopefully in September they qualify. I'm going to skip through these because I've already spoken about them. Here then is this support hub that I mentioned. This is really easily accessible on the website and is the place that I would recommend that you go to first. There are, again, a whole range of resources, case studies, quick start guides, videos, all there for you, all for free to help you get going. And if there is anything that we can help with, you can email help@thenational.academy or grab us on social media. We will do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible to provide any additional support and assistance we possibly can. My final request is please do share the link from this webinar afterwards. We're trying to communicate this to as many teachers and school leaders as we possibly can. I can retweet till I'm blue in the face, but if teachers aren't on social media or aren't seeing through those digital channels, it's very, very difficult for them to find out about us. Your local networks, your union branches, your subject associations, your local school networks are all much better networks for us to get the word out. So if you'd be generous enough to share this link afterwards, we would be really, really grateful. I'm going to stop there, Nick, and hand back to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that whirlwind tour of OAK. The next part of this, I was really keen on this crowdcast to make sure that we had the voice of a school, of a head teacher who had been on a journey in terms of developing their remote education offer. And Donna, I'm so pleased that you agreed to join us to talk us through what you've been doing with OAK. Donna, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Nick. My name's Donna Lewis. I'm head teacher of a single form entry primary school in Macclesfield, Cheshire. Everybody thinks Macclesfield's very leafy and they think of Prestbury and, Cheshire housewives. It's not the case. We have 40% pupil premium, 43% free school meals, 17% of our pupils have an education, health and care plan. And if we take our first concerns through to our SEN support and then EHCP, 49% of our school is on our SEN or closely monitored register. So that gives you a little bit of context. First came across OAK on Twitter, so it does work. And in September, when we returned to school, one of the things that we did was sent a survey out to our parents, which confirmed what we really knew, which was there was limited access to technology, there was limited access to data in some households, there simply wasn't any at all. So it meant that our offer had to incorporate all of the varied needs within our community. All of my staff attended an OAK. You did some initial sort of training back in September. All of my staff attended that, came away and thought, fantastic. They could see lots of ways that we could use OAK. The very first thing we did, so it's nice to see, Matt, when you were talking, is that we mapped it to our curriculum. And if there were any gaps, and there were a couple of gaps, we found other resources, but that meant that we had an overview for every subject area that we could just run with. I gave my staff every other week staff meeting to become familiar with OAK and to start to put together a weekly overview, a map, using some, we use White Rose for maths, so we do use other things as well, but to put together a weekly overview that could very rapidly be pushed out if we had a child that went into isolation or a bubble closure. Touch wood, we didn't have any bubble closures, although we had some staff who tested positive, but because of mitigation, we didn't have to close. So, but we did have children who went into isolation, and we were able to share those weekly overviews with them. And staff found it really useful to know that they were ready, and they were always ready to go. On January the 4th, at 8 o'clock in the evening, when we were told that schools were closing, my staff, fortunately, were already familiar with putting those maps together, but we were able to move very, very quickly to pushing out our remote learning offer to parents. And also, because of the way that Oak works and the fact that we can print everything out, we can print the PowerPoints out, we can edit, we were also able to provide paper packs. And I made a note before, we're producing about 32% paper packs at the moment. But what that means is that we've got 25% of our pupils in. It means that the offer that's happening in school is mirrored in terms of the offer that's happening at home. Because of the way the Oak lessons are organised, and some of them are shorter sessions, for our pupils who are doing most of their access via a phone, it's much, much easier. We don't do any live streaming, any live teaching from school. We have class assemblies, but everything else goes through Oak. And what that means is the offer that all pupils have is the same. One of the fantastic things for us about Oak is you are able to differentiate and put links on, and at no point when a child clicks on that link does it tell them, well, you're in year 4, but that's year 2 work. There is nothing on there that tells a child or might make them feel, lacking in self-esteem. So that was really powerful for us with the level of need we have in school. I've lost my train of thought, sorry. What our staff do is they monitor the work that children are doing, but by the fact that my teaching staff aren't live streaming, and I think it's really easy to get into a peeing competition when you hear what other schools are doing. My staff work one-to-one or with small groups of children, and it frees them up to deliver those types of sessions whilst we know there's an equitable offer for every other, that's similar for every child in school, which means whether you're in school or out of school, we should be making progress and moving through lessons at the same speed. I kind of wrote our remote education provision yesterday, the one that is in legality as of the 25th of January. And as I went through all of the government, they've set a template recently. The way we are working and our use of Oak absolutely matches everything that they are asking us to do. So I feel very confident that if a parent went to Ofsted and complained about our provision, as they were invited to do, what we are doing and the way that Oak is supporting us in what we are doing means that I am very confident that they would have no grounds to come back on us. As I say, I've kind of canvassed a couple of my staff today and said, because one of the big things for me was, it's very intense at the moment when they're working, is that I didn't want them to be working hours into the evening and at the weekends. And I've canvassed staff briefly today, and that's not happening. They're possibly replying to a couple of emails from parents in the evenings, but there isn't a massive workload. And I think that's really important, because what's happening day to day is incredibly intense. So for me, the quality of the lessons is very good, and I'll be honest and say it's improved as well from back in April. So the quality of the lessons is improving all the time, but it helps me preserve my staff well-being. I need my staff to be able to teach at their very best when they're engaging with children, and it's stressful at the moment. They're tired at the end of the day, but Oak is really, really supporting me in preserving well-being of staff whilst ensuring quality of provision to my children. That's me.
Thank you very much for that, Donna. It's really, really reassuring to hear that you've made that journey with Oak National Academy so far, and that particularly concerns of other members that we've got in terms of the requirements and how they're going to meet them. So that's really great to hear. And thank you again for joining us. I know that you've agreed to stay on the call so that if there are questions which maybe you can dip into, that you'll be available, which is great.
And I'm happy if you wanted a copy sort of I'm happy to send over to you to distribute if you wanted a copy of the types, what our overview might look like, those kinds of things. I'm happy to send those so you can share if people were interested.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we've heard from Nick, we've heard from Matt, we've heard from Donna, and it's great to see we've already got 15 questions coming in. Do keep them coming. We've got nearly half an hour still available on this webinar. So I believe that Nick is going to be kind of guiding us through them and probably directed mostly at Matt. But as I say, Donna's here if she's wanting to jump in as well.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Donna. That one of the biggest concerns I hear is about workload at the moment, just trying to juggle so many different competing priorities. And it's brilliant to hear that you're checking in there with the staff and finding that this is really helping to keep things in balance. So that's really reassuring. I'm going to pose a few of these questions now to Matt. Now, I've seen Matt on Crowdcasts before where he just takes these questions and runs with them and literally gets through more questions than I think I've ever seen anyone else ever get through on a Crowdcast. But let me pick the big ones here, Matt, and then let's see how quick we can run through these and see if we can get through all of them by the end, okay?
Yeah.
The question that's come through with the most votes at present is, how can the Oak Academy resources be used for SEND? The second part of that question has partly, I think, been answered there. Also, can they be used for families with no internet or computer access? Matt.
Great. Let's take so first of all, I just was saying, and I haven't bribed Donna. Donna and I have never met, and Donna, it's just really lovely to hear that this has helped. None of us intended to be where we are who are working on this, and just hearing stories like that. I'm going to share this link with the whole team, and it will just absolutely make their day. So thank you very much for walking us through how you're using it. Often what happens in our system is something happens for pupils in mainstream settings, and then there is an afterthought about what happens for pupils in specialist settings. It happens with all different kinds of policy making, and it happens over and over again. And colleagues who are here from the specialist sector, will know that very well. My mum was a teaching assistant in a special school for 20 years. She would whoop me if she thought I was ever going to put anything out into the system that didn't think about pupils from specialist settings, and indeed pupils with SEND in mainstream settings. We tried to tackle both of those things. So let me just walk through the provision. For pupils who are in specialist settings, there are about 600 lessons specifically designed to support them and their parents whilst they're at home. You can navigate to that through the Teacher Hub. You just click on the specialist setting. They cover everything from kind of independent living, all of the great curriculum that would exist in the specialist setting. And just a huge thank you to a group of colleagues from special schools who got themselves together and put this together very, very quickly. We're really, really grateful to them for doing it. So if you have pupils with multiple and complex needs, there are 600 lessons specifically for pupils from specialist settings. For pupils who are in mainstream schools that might have additional needs, we try to do a few things. The first is just basic accessibility on the site. We have made sure that the site is really easy to navigate. The colours, the font are all as accessible as possible. Every single lesson is captioned. You can turn the captions on and off at will. So pupils who need to use the captions are there. And then for the youngest pupils in English and maths, those lessons have British Sign Language attached to them. So for those pupils who are maybe not at the level of reading proficiency that they need to be to keep up with captions, there is also sign language available for those pupils. The single best bit of feedback, and great, Donna, it was great to hear this, the single best bit of feedback that we had from our first mad experiment term was, please can the teachers not say at the start of the lesson, hello year 2? Because what we need to be able to do is share the lesson with the pupil to meet them where they're at, and for them to not feel like they're in year 3 and this is a year 2 lesson. So none of our lessons, even though they're organised by subject and key stage, none of our lessons make any reference at any point to the age group that they're for. The only thing that you might notice is if you have a pupil with profound additional needs who is accessing, maybe they're in Key Stage 3 and they need to access a lesson from Key Stage 1, the only slight challenge is just the tone and nature of the presentation that you would get from a teacher in Key Stage 1 might feel a little on the patronising side. That is the one downside that we've not quite been able to get rid of. But from an accessibility point of view, we've tried to make the mainstream lessons as accessible as possible with pupils with special educational needs. And we have 600 specialist lessons available. And we've actually had some really interesting feedback. I had a conversation with the National Autistic Society, and pupils with various types of additional needs related to autism are actually finding the lessons incredibly useful because they follow such a rigid, structured format. We had to do that because of the pace we were working at. And so we've actually adopted that in my school, where we are using the lessons to help manage the amount of sensory input some of our pupils are getting, because when they're out of the classroom doing an OAK lesson or whether they're in the classroom with their classmates. So that's the question on accessibility for pupils. On the digital divide, like, this remains a big problem. We're an online learning platform in the main. We've tried to do three things. The first one, as we mentioned, is make as much content as possible downloadable. So you can download it, turn it into a pack and send it home. I still realize that's a lot of work for teachers to do, and it's not ideal. The other thing that we've tried to do is just hop up and down and shout as loudly as we possibly can about this problem. And some of you might have seen last week, I was hopping up and down a lot about this issue of data. I'm really pleased at the back end of last week that the big 4 telecommunications companies have come on board to test a solution called zero rating, which means that any pupil accessing Oak National Academy through a mobile device, so a 3 or 4G signal, will incur no data charges for doing so. My next Twitter thread after I leave this call is to announce that all of the other mobile phone providers are on board as well. So the smaller ones, actually some of which serve the communities that we're talking about here. People from low-income families are not necessarily on EE. They're much more likely to be on giffgaff or Asda or Tesco. So great to have those telecoms companies on board as well. But it still remains a problem, and we've got to solve it. We don't think it's hard for us to solve, but we can certainly make some noise about it, and that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Matt. And Donna also mentioned that she's been using the Oak materials printed off as well and using them within school. So there are arrangements there. Just look, credit where credit is due on the getting the company zero rating education sites. Nobody has made more noise on that than Oak, and I know full well that it is you and your team that have been putting the personal calls in to the mobile telecommunications networks on that and making yourself an absolute pain. Well done, Matt. That's been an incredible result.
I'm good at being a pain, Nick. I know you know that. So it's my specialist skill if I have one.
We're trying to make ourselves as much of a pain to get devices into hands as well. So we can do a job on them on that. Next question was, please could you advise on how Oak Academy can support English and additional language pupils?
Oh, great question. I'm not sure we thought hard enough about that, to be honest. I mean, look, the best place to start, depending on the age of your pupils, are some of the Key Stage 1 English lessons. They focus on all of the things that are really important for early language skills. It is also worth, if you're in a mainstream school, looking at the specialist lessons on language and communication as well, because there'll be lots in there that are helpful. If we were to hold our hands up and be guilty of one thing in mainstream settings, it's not learning enough from our specialist colleagues. So do have a look at the curriculum maps they pulled together. There's lots in there that I think could overlap and help there. But it's a really great question, something I'm going to take away and ask the team about.
A comment added there as well about translation facility will be a game changer.
That's a really good idea.
One to take away, perhaps.
Yeah, that can't be that hard, right? We've got a transcript. Can we just translate the transcript? Great question. Good one for me to take away.
Brilliant. Are there any ready-made assemblies for sharing at home and using at school?
Yeah, there is. We haven't created any more of these since the first lockdown. I won't say why. They are still available on our site though, if you want to use them. I think my colleague Ellie is on the chat, who I'm hoping is going to post a link in the chat to them now. If not, we'll get that to the follow-up email to go out to you all. There are about 10. Unfortunately, you have to see me with various types of lockdown haircuts over a 10-week period. But the first one is with the Archbishop of Canterbury. We had Helen Sharman, who was the first British astronaut, Beth Tweddle, who's an Olympic gymnast. We had the West End cast of The Lion King. We had Ant and Dec. We had the Duchess of Cambridge. So if you're struggling for an assembly, they're really lovely. They've got a kind of wider pastoral PSHE vibe about each of them, and could be used to supplement your assembly provision if you want to use them.
Yeah, and that wider vibe, but it's where I can see they have a use. My personal view on the assembly has always been there's something really special about the school assembly, that that's the moment which the school community come together in a moment or a thought. And I was struck that Donna made the point that that's still something they keep at school level on there. Donna, do you want to come in on that? Any thoughts about assemblies?
We I shouldn't be saying this. We use the no outsiders assemblies as well. We've used some, but as you say, there are only a smaller number. So we use no outsiders, but that is our time in the week when we bring the children in school and the children at home together. And we've really carefully timetabled when those assemblies take place. We've timetabled when our group work takes place as well, to ensure that those families with limited digital access can access at the time. I forgot to say that, but timetabling was really important in terms of making sure we didn't have year groups who were supposed to be on at the same time, because we knew for some families that wouldn't work. But the assemblies, that time to celebrate and to actually show that what's happening in school is the same as what's happening at home, has been really powerful.
Brilliant, thank you. I just think it's something really important about, particularly during a prolonged lockdown, that moment of bringing pupils back together with their teachers and within the school community.
I hate that you're right, Nicholas, but I think you're absolutely right, and that's why we've partly brought those to a close.
Okay, as long as it's not my fault, Matt.
It's always your fault. Yeah. What's next?
Right, next question. Now this is one which has come through a few times. Can the Oak Academy Google Forms be copied so that we can use them on Google Classrooms? You mentioned about
yeah.
Google. And part of this is about linking to your classrooms for feedback purposes. You've made it.
So this is there are two things here. One that is really challenging for us, which is there's basically a direct trade-off between logins and accessibility. And we've gone on accessibility because the thing that parents give us most feedback on is, please, please, please don't make this have a login. The kids never remember their login. It's an absolute headache. Just make it really easily accessible. It also involves us collecting and handling lots of data, particularly in our early days. We just weren't robust enough to be able to do that. We have to take our safeguarding responsibility really seriously. That said, I think there are things that we can do, and we've heard this from webinars this week about those quizzes and about the data in those quizzes. So one that I'm taking away, what you can do at the moment is two things. The pupils can do the quiz. They can take a screenshot of it and upload it into your VLE so you can see what's going on. The other thing that you can do is you could just copy the questions out into your own Google form if you want to. But apologies, that's not as streamlined as I would like it to be. And we've heard that really loud and clear this week.
Great. And Donna, can I ask you, sort of like, is this a work in progress? Is it an area that you feel you've got cracked so far in terms of getting the feedback coming back?
That's still part of a work in progress for us. Some of that has been about staff confidence, going far more digital than they've been before. Some of it is about parental confidence, but we're finding ways around it. That I guess that's the part that's the digital element of this is and the remote element is new to all of us. So it's still a work in progress. But as I say, the benefit, the thing that's still coming through really strongly is staff don't feel overwhelmed.
Good, brilliant, thank you. Right. How do you differentiate for children completing the lessons?
Let me ask a clarification question there. Instead of saying, like, what do you do if a kid makes it 50% of the way through or 100% of the way through?
Well, I unless Anika can come back with further clarification on that, I think, I guess it could be differentiation by outcome, the ones that is it about moving more quick, moving more rapidly through, or not completing the lessons at all?
Yes. So Donna mentioned, if we've understand the question right, if not, please come back to us. But the thing that this does allow you to do, and this sort of speaks to that kind of catch-up homework point, right, is you don't have to issue the same link to every single pupil. The majority of the class could have one link. Some of your pupils who are a bit further ahead could take on something more challenging. Some of your pupils who you're catching up, you could give them a different link. So you can differentiate by providing different lessons to different pupils. You can also differentiate by, as I said, getting the information from those quiz questions afterwards. And, at my school, we're a huge advocate of the approach that Donna has taken. The thing that teachers are uniquely placed to do is, school, we call it the last foot, is the thinking about the thinking of the pupil in front of them, and understanding what that pupil knows, doesn't know, what they've understood, what they haven't understood, where they're confident, where they're not confident, and working with them to address that misconception or get them over that next hurdle barrier. I remain wildly skeptical that AI or computers or the future is ever going to replace the last foot between a teacher and a pupil. And that's the thing that you are all uniquely placed to do that we cannot help with. And so from a workload perspective, don't spend ages re-recording an explanation about X, Y, or Z. Another teacher has done that for you, use them for that. And put your energy and effort into the highest leverage thing that teachers can do, which requires them to know their pupil inside out, not just their motivations and then what makes them tick, but also what they know and what they don't know, and move them on to that next stage. This really allows you to direct your teachers to the thing that is the highest leverage, unique thing that they can do that nobody else can come close to. So that is how I would be, if I was a head teacher at the moment, that's how I'd be deploying my staff and my time, exactly how Donna described it.
Brilliant. And Vicky has put in the chat bar there about feedback as well, about how they've used some of the activities from Oak and put them into the online portal. So
yeah, you can download and just upload it into your own VLE. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Is there a clear overview document available from Oak so that we can quickly map against our curriculum?
Yeah, so I mentioned in my presentation, you can get those by subject and key stage. We haven't done a mammoth single document. It would literally be hundreds and hundreds of pages long, but you've got it at the subject and the key stage. So if you go into the Teacher Hub, you navigate by the subject and key stage that you are. So I need key stage 2 maths. You can then get a PDF or an editable version of the entire curriculum map. As I said, that curriculum map does two things. It tells you what's in that curriculum, and it gives you a suggested sequence. It's only suggested. That's just what that head or phase leader thought was a good sequence. It's of course contested, and we had some big raging debates internally about the sequence of things. So it says suggested, change it so it lines up with yours. The other thing that I hope it helpfully does, and should you ever need it, is it sets out the kind of, I don't want to use Ofsted language with Nick on the call, but it tries to set out some of the intent. It tries to set out for you why we did what we did, why we chose what we chose, why the order is the order. And that obviously varies from key stage to key stage, and it varies from subject to subject. There isn't a single hierarchy that covers all of the wonderful things that we teach right across the school. So we've got it down to that level, and those maps are available for you. Download them, use them as you see fit, edit away.
Great, thank you. Great question coming up next is about the resources to support ITE students and NQTs who are entering the profession in challenging circumstances. Good question here about a wider use, I suspect, of recorded lessons. Yeah,
so my background before this was all in teacher and school leader training and development, and so this is something that we thought hard about. On other stuff, watch this space. What have we got now? What we've got now is the ability for teachers, training teachers, early career teachers, in fact any teacher, if you want to watch somebody, observing lots of other teachers doing some of the components that are involved in teaching. They of course can't watch anything about classroom management, running the room, those sorts of things, but there are lots of teachers in schools that they'll be able to go and see do that. What they can do is they can observe a teacher explaining and modeling a concept. Now, when I was a trainee teacher, it was useful to watch any teacher teach, right? I always pick something up from watching any teacher teach. It was always more useful watching a teacher teach the subject and phase that I was going to be teaching. What I think we've got here, what this allows us to do, is watch a teacher teach the thing that you're about to teach. I think we forget that the daunting thing when you're a trainee teacher is explaining the damn thing for the first time. How do I do this in a really clear, succinct way without tripping over myself? And it's always very difficult to watch another teacher teach the thing that you're about to teach, right? Because timetables, right? That just isn't easy. And what your trainee teachers can do now is have a think about, when I'm teaching my lesson on X, and can I watch somebody else do at least some component of it, and they can see that. The second bit of sort of magic sauce here, I think, is one of the things that's really, really valuable, but I think underrated at the moment, is the transcript of the lesson. And every lesson, because of the captioning, has a transcript, which means that as a trainee or early career teacher, not only can you watch somebody explain something, you can just copy and paste some of that transcript to help scaffold your notes for your explanation in your plan. And so what these amazing 350 odd teachers have done is basically provided a starter for 10, a blueprint for teaching a huge amount of content that can then be adapted. The thing that I think would be really useful is for trainee teachers to listen to the teacher meta talk about the lesson that they delivered. Why did they make the choices that they made? Watch this space on that one.
Great, thank you. We're moving towards the last 5 minutes or so. So let's see how many of these we can get through.
Great, rapid fire. I'll be quick.
Any plans for Oak to go onto the TV? So no internet needed.
At the moment, no. Very challenging for us to do a format, but the BBC have got stuff on the TV at the moment, and we think they're great. So BBC on the telly.
Okay, would it be possible to indicate if a lesson is going to be removed? As some year one PSHE lessons were planned to be used, but they're not available.
Yeah, so there's some content from our first term that we've had to take down. The reason we had to take it down was because it was created under a specific set of COVID copyright rules that no longer exist. I know that's annoying. Apologies. We had no choice. We had to bring them down. There are occasions where lessons that have been created that we plan to launch, we either didn't manage to do it. Remember, these are being created by teachers who are in schools themselves, who are subject to all of the same challenges we all are. So occasionally there are bumps. Apologies for that. Just a flag, there are about 500 lessons coming before the end of January, mainly in creative subjects. This is Key Stage 2, so 3 and 4, RSHE, Primary, MFL, Primary Art, Key Stage 1 to 3, Design and Technology, Key Stage 1 to 3, PE. I've definitely forgotten something. Sign up to our mailing list, the green button underneath my face here, and we'll let you know when those lessons are available. But we do our best to try and not cause that disruption. And apologies, I know we promised some primary RSHE that didn't make it over the line. It's on its way.
Okay, you mentioned PE is coming along. I saw a comment further down here asking about, can there be any prompts for getting children to move during all of this? I think increasing concern about how much time kids are spending in front of their screens. 100%.
Key Stage 1 to 3 PE on its way to you.
Okay, is there a quick way to search by year group rather than Key Stage? We've touched upon this a little bit already, haven't we?
So the pupils can, in their classroom, search by year group. The reason that we took the decision to not tag by year group is for that inclusion aspect and to give more flexibility by Key Stage. So if you look in the curriculum map, it will give you a sequence and you can sort of see where you think that's going to be. But we tried to resist doing by year group in the Teacher Hub so that we didn't get tripped up by this issue of everybody in year 2 doing the same things. Different schools cover different things across a Key Stage. So no is the short answer.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask one more question here, and I'm sorry that we haven't managed to get through them all. It was just one that came afoot here for Donna. Which VLE platform do you use, Donna? And did Oak Academy use Strive, your choice there?
No, we use Teams. So that's what we use, and fortunately, it works beautifully with it.
Brilliant. Look, thank you. Before I just hand back to Natalie to finish this off, I just want to thank you, Matt, and your team for incredible work that you've done. I can't believe that this time last year we had no idea that we were heading towards a lockdown. That you were doing something completely different, and yet in this space of time, you've got 10,000 lessons designed, and you've mobilised some fantastic teachers and schools across the country to get behind this. Thank you. Word inspirational has been used in the chat bar there, and I think you absolutely have been. And Donna, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us about what you've done there. That's been incredibly useful. Natalie, I'll pass back over to you now. Before I do, Alison, thank you also for your time today and for signing throughout all of this, which, given the speed at which we've been speaking, that could not have been particularly easy. Thank you all for joining us. Natalie, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, just to reiterate, thanks again to all the guest speakers today and to Alison, and also to all of you who've joined us this evening, members and non-members. From the comments in the chat, clearly it has been very useful. Certainly from my point of view as a parent, somebody who's working with Oak Academy at home, it's interesting to see the background to it and how, you know, how it all builds on as well. So hopefully you've seen the link to the mailing list for Oak Academy at the bottom of your screen. If you aren't a member of NAHT and you would be interested in joining us, there will be a link in the chat as well to take you to that page of our website. If you are a member of NAHT and you're inspired during these times to support other colleagues through your branches, there's also a link to becoming a rep. As always, at the end of these briefings, just to remind you that in these times, you know, our FAQs are always there for your reference. If you need some further advice, don't hesitate to contact the Specialist Advice team. Look out for further webinars as well. And have a fantastic evening. Keep going. Well done. Thanks, everybody. Good evening.
Thanks all.
Thank you.